Hello, it's Keith here. I'm going to be trying something a little bit different today. Now, I've been thinking for quite a while it would be interesting to do a debugging video where I actually teach the procedure of how I find a problem in my program, work out what's causing it and then correct it without sort of creating one artificially, so that you had a real experience of what it's like debugging assembly language code. Unfortunately, I'm not at a point where I'm confident enough to do that. Sometimes debugging can take me hours and it's extremely stressful and frustrating. So I want to do that at some point, but for now I thought we could do something maybe a little bit easier and a little bit maybe less stressful for me. I'm going to show you how I'm going to port one of the levels from the Amstrad CPC version of ChibiAkumas to the upcoming Enterprise version. Now, for those who don't know, the Enterprise and the CPC have almost the exact same graphics system with just a slight change to the way the screen coordinates are calculated. So the vast majority of the code is identical, and I'm hoping that this will not take more than maybe half an hour to convert it, and that we shouldn't come up with any major problems. So hopefully it will be interesting for you to see the procedure I'm having to do for each of the levels. You'll be able to see some of the code of the levels, and I'll talk through what the code does as we do it. So maybe this will be interesting, and maybe some bugs will come across and we'll have to fix them. So I hope you'll enjoy this, but I hope it won't be too long and boring, and I won't be swearing too much because there's too many problems. So let's see what happens. Anyway, let's move this out of the way. So I've already ported level 1 and 2, and today we're going to be doing the first half of level 3, which is the underwater level. So now this is the bootstrap, which is the code within the game that actually handles the loading of levels and the starting of the game. There's a rather odd thing. The game actually refers to there being 9 levels because each level in the game has 2 stages, like the main part and the boss battle. So the numbering of the levels is a bit misleading. So level 4 is the zombie tube battle at the end of level 2. So I apologise for that. I changed to the word stage to make it a bit clearer later. But so what we're actually going to be working with is level 5. And what I'm doing here is I'm setting the game engine to not show the main menu, to actually jump straight to the levels so that we don't have to waste any time when the game starts up. So we'll just save that. Now I'm going to open the build file. Now this is what I use to compile all of the game engine. So now that I've made that change to Bootstrap, I need to recompile. We can see build ent is enabled there, so we're building for the Enterprise, and we just saw that up here. Some of the codes listing, I must have had a problem at some point that I needed to check where the code is compiling to, but that doesn't matter. Just a bit of rubbish on screen. So there we go. So that is now going to try and load. So it won't work, but let's just run it. So there's the game starting, and it can't find the files because we've not put them on the disk yet. So obviously that's not going to work. So let's have a look at that then. Well, what we need to do next is we need to load the level 5 file here, and this is the actual level data itself. And so we're copying as I say, the Enterprise version is far simpler than the Spectrum or the MSX versions are. So all we need to do is go find build CPC, and what we're going to do is we're going to replace this if build CPCV. Now CPCV will be 1 if we're building for the CPC, or 0 if we're building for anything else. And WinApe can do mathematics where an if statement will execute the following code if any of the statements are true. So I'm saying if we're building for the CPC or the Enterprise, we want to include this file. This is the sprite data file, and the sprite data is identical for the CPC and the Enterprise because the screens are structured in the exact same way. So all we need to do is that there. And we've got build CPC here. This is turning on the CPC Plus palette. The Enterprise, I've actually written an emulator to emulate the CPC Plus graphics, so we want to use that as well. Here we've got this is going to be tricky. Here we've got the effects for the fade out where the water rises, if you've seen the game. So that's going to work on the Enterprise as well, hopefully. I really don't know what's going to go on there. Now here's the end of the level with the fade out, I think that is. Here we've got the code that handles the background graphics. They will need changing potentially if they've not been used before. I think maybe they're all okay. I need to check that blackout. That blackout won't work. That's going to be tricky. Okay. The blackout interlaces. It blacks out 1 line in every 4 or something like that, and then 1 in every 2 to make it progressively darker without wasting too much CPU power. I need to have a look at that because that's not going to work. So we've got build CPC here, and this is the level tiles again. the Enterprise can use those. We'll have them. This is the bit shifter. Again, we can use that. And the CPC and the Enterprise screen are the same size. We can use that too. This is the gradient definitions. Again, they're just fine. The water rise effect. Well, the water rise effect. I can't even remember how it works. That's not very good, is it? Okay, I think it uses the plus palette on the CPC plus, so that will work okay. We'll have to look at that. Now, these are the raster screen colors. The Enterprise doesn't use those. However, we need to enable them anyway because it's completely emulating the CPC, so it needs the data structures, although it will never actually use them because it uses those CPC plus, the superior CPC plus colors. We don't copy this save direct. The save direct saves directly to the floppy disk in WinApe. That won't work. So what we need to do is we need to copy. Let's copy this because I just need the. What we need to do is we need to save the file directly to BLD-ENT, I believe it is. Just like this, ENT. And let's just go there and just check. So yeah, we're putting all of our files in build-ent. So this is the code and the primary spike bank here in T10SC1. So if I go to File, Drive A, Edit Disk, Add Remove DOS, AMS-DOS headers because we need rid of that. T10 SC1 DO2. Right, well that's disk 1, so that's not going to work. So if I just put insert disk image disk 2, File, Drive A, Edit Disk. Need to tick that, otherwise it puts 128k of garbage at the start of the file, and that should be the one we want. T10 SC2 D02, and if we just assemble this, oh, we've got some bugs. Okay. I should just explain that file I've just extracted there. The sprites of the levels are split into two parts, one for the 64k and one for the 128. So the Enterprise needs the second part as well. So all I've done is I've copied it off the Amstrad disk, removing the Amstrad header because the Enterprise doesn't want that. So that's why I was copying that file off the Amstrad disk. So we got some problems here. What's going on here then? Okay, here we go. It's because we're using the CPC. We've not copied the Enterprise headers in here, so we need to do the same. We need to change these to if build CPCV plus build entv. So again, the screen size is identical, but this is not. This is what we need to change. So I think will work okay. This is defining the sort of, as I say, it's an interlacing effect, and it will fill a few lines and then skip a few lines so that the effect can progress as time goes on. It's to make the screen background black without doing anything really complex like a checkerboard. It's just a crude interlace. So now, as I say, there is a this is the, this is okay. So I missed one there. So that's okay, but this is not. Now the Enterprise screen by default, unlike the Amstrad, the lines are actually below each other. You can configure the the Enterprise to completely mimic an Amstrad CPC screen, so that I would not need to make this change. However, it's actually faster the way the Enterprise works by default, and it takes more memory to make it completely emulate the Amstrad CPC. So in both cases, it was beneficial. It's beneficial as an end result for me to rewrite this code for the Enterprise rather than make it completely emulate the Amstrad CPC screen, which sadly is actually inferior. So normally on the Amstrad CPC, what we had to do is we had to add 8000 to HL and 800 sorry to HL, and then if bit 7 changed, well, depending on where the screen buffer was, if bit 7 changed, if bit 7 was non-zero, then we would carry on. But if it was 0, then we'd actually gone off the bottom of the screen, and we would have to add CO50 to get back to the top of the screen. On the Enterprise, it's much simpler. All we have to do is add hex 50, which is 80 bytes, and then add that to L. If we've not just gone over the limit of what the single register can take, then we need to change. Then we carry on. But if we have, then we need to change H as well, and all we need to do is add 1 to H, and that's it. So the benefit of this is we aren't using the DE pair here, so that's saving a few bytes of code there, and obviously some speed. And this doesn't need to be changed where irrespective of where the screen buffer is. This doesn't need to be changed, so it's faster, it's simpler, it uses less registers. So okay, let's try compiling again. This level 5. Oh, still some problems. Blackout line step. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, so that's me being silly then. Now, what these are is I think that's actually dummy code. I don't think that's doing anything. I think that's actually some old code or something. I don't know what that does. It's possible this was based on something else, and this has been left just as a sort of, maybe as I was debugging it, this is a sort of remnant of that, because I can't see that's doing anything. We'll try it and see if we get a crash. But anyway, yeah, because the screen buffer can be at C000 or 8000 on the Amstrad CPC, the command you have to use to check if you've gone over the bottom of the screen varies. Now that, and I modify it with self-modifying code, and so when I call the background, I have to give the self-modifying code to apply. We don't need to do that on the Enterprise, which is why I was just remming out that bit of code there. Still not there. I don't know what that's all about. Anyway, okay, so we need that, but if def actually this needs to be build CPC or build no, there's something wrong here. Okay, no, I'm being stupid here. No, this does need to change because this is moving the number of lines, so I'm making a big mistake here. So that's correct. That does need to stay. So what I need to do with this, I need to copy this to here. And rather than being 8, that needs to be 50. This is going to be tricky. Okay. Now, let's have a look. Water rise, where's water rise? Missing some code here. So it's a long time since I wrote this code originally. It's a couple of months ago. So just struggling a little bit. I can only find this in the ZX Spectrum code. I don't quite understand that. Okay, so I've just had to have a look and figure out what went wrong there. I incorrectly replaced if ndef build CPC with def build CPC or enterprise. So this compiles on the Spectrum or the MSX only, not on the CPC, and that means also not in the enterprise. I really didn't know what was going on there. So okay, so that should. Again, so we want it to be building, and I think that'll work. If not, there we go. So now at least we can compile our file. So we need this for the Spectrum or the Enterprise, but not the Spectrum or the MSX, but not the CPC or the Enterprise. We do the color effect. There's two effects. There's the fade out of the background, which is the interlacing effect we were just talking about, and there's the rising of the water, which is done with palette switching on the Enterprise and the CPC. So that's the reason for that. Okay, so let's see what happens if we try and run this now. Who knows what will happen. So the game's starting now, and we're still asking for a disk. Okay. I think that's relating to music, but let's just now the program just says set disk 2, but we can actually, if we start our debugger and we go to it's about, let's just scroll down, we find the word set, you see there's set disk, we can see it's trying to load T29SC1.D02. Okay, well that's not what I expected actually. Oh, that's a loading screen. Okay. Yes, okay, well we can do that. So what we need to do there is we need to load up the CPC one, which is this. Actually, that's not it. It's T20 SC8. I've loaded the wrong one. That's the zombie. That's the wrong one. That's what that is. So T29 SC1. That's not right either. What am I doing wrong here? Ah, okay. That's me being stupid. Right. Well, this is actually expecting there to be 2 disks, and it's not actually tried to load the file yet. So the file name isn't correct. It only updates the file name once it's actually got the right disk in. So it's going to demand. I put disk 1 in disk 2 in because it assumes disk 1's still in, and now it's asking for disk 2 again. And the reason now, I think, if we start the debugger again. T10 SC8D02. T10 SC8D02. SC8 is kind of the moniker for the loading screens. So I've not compiled this loading screen for the Enterprise yet. So this should be pretty easy, I think. All I should need to do is change this to source int, use the Enterprise version of the ILE decoder, which is basically identical to the normal one. It just, the line change commands are different again. So if I now compile that, if I close this, close my emulator here. I've just compiled that to Did I overwrite that? Yes, I always keep backups. I've just overwritten the CPC version. It's not very good. Just using the undo buffer there to undo my mess. I do keep. I take regular backups of all the files in this folder, so I can always get the unmessed up version out of a backup if that hadn't worked. So just close that. Just wondering if that would have noticed the change. Okay, well, I'm getting tired of this insert disk nonsense. So my understanding is we will only need one disk for the Enterprise because it uses 3.5-inch disks, not weird 3-inch disks. So let's just nip that in the bud now so I don't go completely insane. So what we need to do for that is there is a disk remapping function here. If I can just find it. All it is well, before asking for a disk, it will remap the disk that the code requested. God, where is it? There's so much code. Key maps, key maps, key maps, key maps. Did I just go past it? There it is, disk remap. So this, you can see, okay, so we just need to set this disk map single disk. So if I go to the build section here, yeah, you see. So on some systems it's a single-sided disk, so if I just define this to equals 1, and of course if you were using 4 disks on some systems and 2 disks on others, then you could use a different remapping. So yep, so that's held in the core. So if I run the program again, it will only now ask me to insert the disk if the file is completely missing. Okay, so why is it asking me for disk 1 there? That's curious. So what that means is it's looking for a file. It can't find the file. So it's whining about disk 1 because it knows now that any file it should possibly need should be on the current disk. So could be a music. It's probably the music file. Well, let's just check again. So if I do set again, yeah, which is I'm just using this conveniently because I know that this. So SC9, yes, that's a music file. Okay. Again, SC8 would mean a screen file. SC9 means a music file. So, right, okay. I can't use the Amstrad music because the Amstrad music is compiled to a different memory location. But what I can do, it's actually the same file as the first level. So SC8. T6, that's not it, T10 SC8, disk 1. It's that one, that's the one I want. The music is the same for all of the levels, so all I'm doing is copying the level 1 music from disk 1 to level 5 on disk 2, or level 3, whatever, depending on how you look at the level numbering. So all I'm doing is changing that to disk 2. And there we go. So you can see now, already the game is now working. The music sounds quite slightly different. That's because the Enterprise doesn't have an AY sound chip, so it's using an emulator, which I didn't write because I'm not smart enough. It's Stan V and Gecko, who wrote that, or wrote and ported it. So that's what's really making the game easy to convert. So you can see here, everything looks like it's working pretty much okay. Oh. Now what happened there? That's probably the start of the fade out. I think that's the fade out code kicking in, and as I say, it's not going to work right because the next line commands are working in jumps of 80 pixels, of 80 bytes, sorry, on the Enterprise. Now, during some of the stages, you're jumping actually in 4 lines at a time, and on the CPC, because we're adding 0.8, that will add 0.32. But on the Enterprise, I think we'd be adding like 360. Well, that's over a single byte's potential. So the code to do that isn't going to work properly. Let's just have a look at what actually has happened there. So something's crashing here, where the stack pointer looks roughly in the right place. I mean, it's possible the stack's been corrupted because the stack's just above the screen memory, so if anything overwrites the screen memory, well, yeah, all hell's going to break loose basically. So okay, so let's just do some more work here. So this is the level 5 code. So if we toggle this show level time in, and then just compile this, you can see now we've got a number at the top of the screen just here. The first number is the current level tick, and the second number is the next event that's going to occur in the level. So that would be like an object appearing on the screen, like an enemy, or some other event. Now what I'm expecting to see is I'm expecting to see it crash, and when it crashes I will look at what number just occurred, and I will then look at the code and see what event happened at that number position, and I'm assuming it's going to be the fade out, the gradient fade out. Oh. Well, that tore that plan because the screen has actually corrupted. I think it was about 48. Hang on a minute, I'm recording video. Let's just watch the video. Okay, so it looks like 46. So that's 46 in hex, and that's 70. So we need to go down here and look for the line that starts with the 70. Okay. Well, that's unexpected then. So something is corrupting the something's causing corruption. It's causing a crash. So I'm very surprised that's happening, because I was expecting everything to work okay. But what it is probably is maybe a sprite is improperly defined, and it's corrupting memory off the bottom of the screen. But I would have really expected that to have occurred on the Amstrad CPC, because, as I say, while there is some data relating to the screen definition on the Enterprise below the screen, got a B. So that's 75, so that would be this command that's causing the problem. Okay, well, so if I turn off this fish here, let's see if that fixes the crash. Yeah, so it's that fish that's causing the problem. Now, okay, so something else. Another fish has just arrived and has just totally caused trouble. Okay, so why would the fish be causing a problem? Well, because the screen is memory wrapped, anything that draws off the bottom of the screen, that the program allows to draw off the bottom of the screen, will corrupt some data somewhere. Now, with regards to the Enterprise, this could cause two problems. If it corrupts off the bottom of the screen of the second screen buffer, that will corrupt the stack, which will cause a call to a random memory location. If it corrupts below the bottom of the screen on the Enterprise version, it will actually corrupt. It will actually corrupt the definitions of the screen memory itself. The screen memory has a definition bank on the Enterprise which doesn't exist on the CPC. So I'm kind of guessing that's what's happening here, and that's why the screen just went haywire, but the game did look like it was still playing. Okay, well, what is the most likely cause of that? Well, my first suspicion is going to be the sprite. ChibiAkumas, the game engine Akio, relies on sprites being basically square. If they're not square, then the clipping does not work. The clipping is where bits of the sprite are excluded, depending on if a sprite's half on the screen at the bottom, then you need to remove half of it and not draw it. If the sprite isn't properly square, then the clipping will be incorrect, and part of the sprite will be drawn even though it shouldn't be. And so I'm taking a guess that the superfish sprite, as it's called, which is this blighter here. Oh, not that one, that one. So that looks okay. 32 by 32. That's a square sprite. That looks okay, and it's fixed size. Okay, well that doesn't really fit with my hypothesis there. Okay. Well, the Enterprise is basically the same as the CPC. So let's say resave the sprites here. So this should be level 5A here. And we need to save this one over that file we exported originally from the disk. So release ent, build ent. It's that one. Okay. So we'll turn on, well, let's cause some trouble. Rather than me playing the game over and over again, let's put this superfish at the start of the level. So I'm moving it to position 11, which should just be at the start of the level. My hypothesis at this point is that the data in the sprite that we just viewed, while it appeared correct, maybe it hadn't been, the latest version hadn't been exported. Okay, it looks like it works now. So it's possible that I made the correction, but I tend to be very sort of reactive. So if something corrupts, I correct it, but if it doesn't corrupt, I don't make changes. So maybe I found a problem on the Spectrum version is terrible for this kind of crash. So maybe I found a problem on the Spectrum version and corrected it, but on the CPC version never came across a problem, so it didn't make that correction. So now I've taken that superfish off for the start of the level, and I've put it back to its proper position, and we'll just see now if the level plays past that 4B point when the superfish kicks in. And wasn't superfish a Lenovo Trojan or something? I don't know if that was intentional or not. It was a pun based on the fact that the fish was flying like Superman, I think, originally. 9AB 5. So yes, so it's working now. So it looks like that sprite was incorrectly defined in the sprite definition files, and that's why we were getting that rather nasty crash there. But yeah, it looks like it's working okay now. So we'll see how far we can play on. I'm expecting some terrible occurrences to happen when the fade out happens, because as I say, I'm pretty sure that I have not correctly changed that code. Whether it crashes or just looks ugly, we will see. Now, notice with regards to the sound, some of the effects sound exactly the same, some sound odd. It's the drums that sound odd. So what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to use Arcus Tracker and make some alternate drum sounds and find the ones that are most pleasing for the Enterprise. The Enterprise does have its own very competent trackers, but I'll be honest with you, I don't really have the time or willpower. Okay, so that's the fade has just started and it's just crashed the game. I don't have the time or the willpower to write music for different systems, so if the game will be open source, if some really skilled Enterprise or tracker author programmer wants to change the game and put better music in, I totally encourage them to do that. But for me, it's a bit just get it out there, get this game on as many systems as possible to try and build up an enthusiastic audience for it. So I can't really justify spending weeks making more music. So okay, so anyway, so we got to I should have checked the point that crashed, but I didn't. But I know that it's going to be the blackout. So let's have a look at the blackout code. So you have these definitions here: blackout 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, etc. Where are they? Oh, they're here. Okay. Okay, so this is going to be fun. Sarcasm there. It's not going to be fun at all. So you can see here that the definitions are basically hard coded to the system. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work at all. Okay, so 08 here is one line, 10 is 2 lines. So the question is, what is the maximum? 08, 1, 01, oh well that's a spectrum, that doesn't matter. 08, 10, 10, 18, 30. Six lines, isn't it? Okay, so well, we can't do that. I'm wondering whether to slightly tweak it. As I say, I can only do if I'm using a 1 byte line change, then I can only do 80. There's 80 bytes per line, so oh, come on, calculator. So I can only do 3 line changes in a single byte jump. So I'm just wondering whether to actually reprogram this code so that it never does more than a three line change, because as I say, that will make my life a lot less miserable, which is generally preferable. Although I'm saying that, these are the defaults, but are these defaults ever actually used? 2, 1. Yeah, I'm not sure they're ever actually used. It might be that these are the sort of testing defaults that I put in, but I can't remember how it works. I can't remember if these actually ever happen in real life. If I was doing it on the Amstrad, I'd just put a breakpoint in, compile, and then quickly test it. But because of the compression, I can't compile a level straight to the disk. I have to save the compile to the operating system, then run that through the compressor, then add it to the disk, then run the emulator. So it turns what would be seconds if it was written straight to the disk into sort of minutes. It's a real pain. So I'm not going to do that. So let's have a look, and we'll just figure it out. Terrifying, you know. I only wrote this code a few months ago, 2 months, 3 months ago, something like that. I can't remember how it works. It's partially a lie to say I wrote it. I modified it. I originally wrote it with ChibiAkumas episode 2, and then I ported it so it worked on the Spectrum as well. So let's have a look at level 5 here. Some code there that doesn't do anything. Oh. But that's useful. What this is it's a test of the fade out of the blackout code. So let's bring this back in. Test codes are good. So what we're going to do here is we're going to cause the blackout to happen as soon as the level starts, so that I don't have to play off the game again. And then we'll just put a big row of semicolons here, just so that I can remember which code I need to delete later. Okay, so we turn blackout on here, and when we call blackout 5, so let's see. So as far as I can tell, because those both events are, both happen at the same time, blackout 5 will effectively be run, this code here, before the actual blackout is applied. The blackout's applied as a sort of extra layer above the background. So these will actually be the first settings that the blackout is run with, not the ones that are hard-coded above. As I said earlier, I think these ones hard-coded above are just sort of a relic of some testing, and they never actually apply. So this is 3 lines here. So this is 3 lines that are being added here. And so what I need to do here would be 50 times 3, so that's F0. So FO should have the same effect on the Enterprise as adding 800 3 times on the CPC. So this one is that's an FO again, and that will be, let's double check this, but my mathematics is terrible, so I'm just double checking at A0. So that's changing the wrong one. That's the number of lines, I think. I can't remember what that is. Yeah, I think that's the number of lines in total. So H and L are the number of lines to fill, and the number of lines to, they're the skips between. Okay, I filled a line, now skip this. Oh, I filled a line, now skip this. So yeah, sorry, not the one of them. I think it's maybe the first one is the number of lines to move down when a fill is applied, or something like that. That's tricky. It's really hard to remember how it works. But anyway, we just need to make it. We just need to convert the damn thing. So that's A0 and that's F0. You can see I've made comments that some of them maybe aren't reliable. I think there was a bug in it where it was overwriting too much of the screen, but I believe I fixed that. So I don't know why it still says they're buggy here. So here we got 1010, so these are going to change to A's because that's 160. That's just for the enterprise. And then here again, so this is 0810. This is just for the enterprise. I knew this was going to need some changes, but I was being very stupid, and I assumed it would just be the line. The next line command would need a slight change. I'd totally forgotten that it had all of these hard-coded line changes in it. So yeah, you've been very dumb there. So this will be 0505. So this is the line that's being changed by that, and it's being toggled, and I guess being flipped at some point, so that the line changes will occur. Because as I said, this is actually overwrite. It draws the proper background and then it overwrites this over the top, which is going to cause a slowdown. However, it was just a convenience to make coding simple because I didn't want to write tons and tons of code. So it's just overwriting the old background. And then we can swap the background while the user can't see. That didn't compile the wrong file there. Compiling build is only the core, the game engine itself. The levels are executable code as well. And so I should have compiled the level, not the core. Okay, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, 10. Right, so that's working. That's what it's supposed to do. That's not right. Okay, so so what went wrong there? It nearly worked. It didn't crash, which is good. We'll take not crash. We'll have that. So let's have a look. I've obviously made some horrendous mathematical mistake here. 05. That's supposed to be 5050, not 05. That's me being thick there, and that's supposed to be 50 as well. I've got too used to the Amstrad one, where of course we're changing on the Amstrad we're changing H, and on the Enterprise we're changing L. So the magnitude is different, and so I just got carried away with my 08, changing my 08s to 05s, forgetting that on the Amstrad it's effectively 800, and on the Enterprise it's effectively 50. Okay, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, 10. There we go, there we go. That doesn't quite look right. Still not right. don't know if you spotted that. I should have put that should have been build CPC, so I'd presumably correctly changed the enterprise code, but then I'd accidentally applied the CPC code, which of course had the wrong values still. That's why all the lines were being filled at the top and the rest of the screen wasn't filled at all. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A, B, C, D, E, F, 1. There, darker, darker. Right, that's pretty much what it's supposed to do, but one of those in between didn't look right. Let's have another look at that. Now, the reason the other objects are still showing is because this is has to be very cleverly designed within the level itself, so there's no other objects on screen, and then as well as the blackout effect, we then switch the background code and then turn the background effect off slowly so that the user just sees everything's changed and doesn't realize that we've actually switched the background code, because writing the background code to do a submersion effect would have been a real pain, so this is a crude alternative. So, okay, there's something wrong. So that one's okay. That one. We're going to look at that twice, but that shouldn't cause any problems. Have another look. One of them isn't. One or maybe two of them aren't right. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just being pessimistic. I can't remember what it looks like generally. I mean, that's got every other line missing. Oh, you know, maybe I'm wrong. I think it's working. I think I'm just overestimating how good it looked, and it really doesn't look as good as I thought it did. So okay, well, I think maybe that's okay then. So we could delete this, but it saved our day today. So let's rem it out for when I'm porting to the God knows what else I'll port to next. I'm looking at. I'm not porting this, but I'm planning to do some Sampo Coupe games in the future. I'm also looking at Game Boy programming and Master System, Game Gear, virtually the same console programming. I couldn't port this game, it's too complex. I might write some little games in my tutorials. But I mean, for those who don't know, the reason I'm porting to so many consoles is just to try and build up more of an audience for the game, because yeah, I've put a lot of time and effort and, shall we say, passion into developing this, and so I want to try and keep doing them, and it's just a question of trying to get enough people following and hopefully, you know, showing encouragement so that I can keep the motivation up, because you know, you probably play this game and you think, oh yeah, this is like half an hour's fun, this is quite nice, and I hope you think that. If you don't think that, I'm sorry, but you know, fair enough if you don't. But the thing you got to bear in mind is for me to write this game, the original game took 6 months and the port has taken 5 months. And when I say 6 months, it's not, oh, I woke up one day and then thought, hey, it'd be great to make a game, and then 6 months later the game appeared. Oh wow, that's great. It's not that. You have to. The game is your life for 6 months. You just have to work on the game all the time. Every day you have to work on the game. You have to just basically allocate every moment you've got to the game, because otherwise it won't be finished or it won't work. And you know, time is, you know, everyone's got the same amount of time, you know, 24 hours a day. It's the game has to be so. What's happened there? Something's gone wrong there. You have to be able to allocate. You have to be able to justify allocating all of this time to the game, and that takes a lot of discipline and a lot of enthusiasm from yourself to actually bring it to completion. And if it feels like no one else is even playing the damn thing, if no one's really interested in it, if there's no constant encouragement, it becomes a very difficult prospect to do that. And I've got a couple of follow-up games planned for this one, but we're talking about me developing for the next 2 years at a rate which basically absorbs all of my free time. Okay, well, that's a bit tough. And it's not just a question of, well, you could argue, well, if you choose to do it, well, that's your choice. Well, fair enough, but you got to also bear in mind that I'm actually allocating time to this rather than studying Japanese, because I live in Japan, and I'm actually putting more work into programming these games now than I am actually learning the language or continuing to maintain my ability in the language of the country I'm living in. And it's very hard for me to justify that to myself. You start to think, well, you're a blooming idiot. What are you doing that for? You're not earning any money from it. No one's really playing it. They're certainly not telling me if they're playing it. Anyway, that's enough of that ongoing rant. Okay, so something went pretty seriously wrong towards the end here. Okay, let's have a look at the video again. Okay, it's Keith here again. Right, so I've had a look at the video, and it looks like the crash occurred as the fade out was about to complete. What I think the problem is, now, as I said before, I wrote an emulator for the CPC Plus color palette on the Enterprise, but I think we're actually corrupting some registers here, because the Enterprise version is more complex. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to push IX and IY and put them here. I think maybe that's what's going wrong, because you can see we're protecting a lot of registers here, but on the CPC Plus, CPC Plus is basically just a memory copy of the data, and then the interrupt handler deals with it. But on the Enterprise, the interrupt handler doesn't deal with it, because there are no raster interrupt color changes. It's all done by the hardware, and so there's a conversion routine that is converting the CPC Plus color definitions with the raster lines to Enterprise memory locations, because it's all held in this bank of memory that the screen reads at every single frame. It's very clever on the Enterprise. So if it crashes again, I'll actually change it so it jumps straight to the point where the fade occurs, where the submersion occurs, just so I don't keep playing this same bit over and over again. But maybe I'm feeling lucky. Maybe we'll fix it straight off the bat. Could be something else. I'm looking at where the crash occurred and looking at what commands ran in that point and thinking, well, okay, well, what commands do I know have changed on the Enterprise? And one thing I know has changed is the palette switch code is more complex now, and so uses basically the entire register set rather than the old one, which didn't really use very many. You'd have to spend a lot of time playing your own game to debug it. I'm really quite tired of this game, unfortunately, now. I made it worse. Well, that's unexpected. Okay. Pop IX, pop IY, push IX, push IY. I've got them the wrong way around. You need to pop them off in reverse order to the way you pushed them. So that's it's interesting. I mean, maybe that confirms my theory. I know I'm forgetting exactly what. Let's just open it up. Forgetting exactly what the So yes, yeah, okay, update plus rasters. I mean, you can see using IXIY, we're using everything pretty much. Don't use the shadow registers. I try to avoid using the shadow registers because they don't tend to be very practical, but I do use IXIY a lot. So basically the enterprise code uses everything, and the code for the water submersion effect uses everything. For the level code, sorry, not the water submersion effect. So what I'm going to do here, you see this jump to level time, new level time thing here. I'm going to put one of these in. What this does is it tells the game engine to change the time to a different time, and then jump in this code to a different point. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to find the code where the water starts. Oh, it was actually this. Is it? Yeah, it's actually this. Okay. Let's try that. Well, we got some of it done. So we're now crashing at C0. Okay, so let's see what C0 does. Obviously does something. 192. Be quiet. Set palette underwater. Oh, these rotten palette changes. So it's the exact same problem again. So all we need to do is copy paste, save some typing and save me making another embarrassing mistake. So pop, pop, pop. Oh, and there we go. So that's the submersion effect, and now this is the underwater part running normally. Now the thing I'm quite pleased with, partially with myself, but partially with the enterprise, these are all of the same colours, give or take, that the CPC Plus had, because the fact of the matter is the enterprise has almost as good colour ability as the CPC Plus, and it can do the same line level color changes as the CPC Plus, but it doesn't need any CPU power. On the CPC Plus, it's the rasters that are, it's line level interrupts that are doing all the work, but on the enterprise, it's the hardware. It's hardware based, so the hardware automatically reads a bank of memory from the screen and uses that as color definitions at the line level. You can change the color to every single line, and unlike on the CPC, it's rock solid because there is no problem with interrupts being disabled delaying the color changes. Because you know, the color changes are all done by the hardware. Really nice. So, well, I think that's gonna be about it. I'll play all the way through to the end of the level, I guess. Just to, I haven't got any power-ups, of course, because I missed all the power-ups because they were in the first half of the level that we programmatically skipped. So I'm not going to have enough power really. Because you'll notice though, so that's said about the CPC Plus and the Enterprise, you'll notice the Chibico character doesn't look as good on this version, because basically you're seeing the 128K version of Chibico with the Plus colour palette, and the Plus, the Enterprise has nothing comparable to the hardware sprites of the CPC Plus, and so you know, that is a significant reduction. But as I say, there we go, and that's the end of the level. So now it's trying to find the next level, which doesn't exist, and I'm not going to record that. Well, there we go. This turned out to be a bit more exciting than I hoped it would be, because I was hoping this was going to be a really quick port, but there were some bugs, and we fixed them. So I hope you've watched this. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've sort of said before, whenever you come across a bug in your game code, I mean, the first thing is not to sort of panic and get too stressed out about it, because there were times I just felt like throwing everything against the wall and sulking for the rest of the day. It's not going to fix anything, so don't do that. So if you see a bug, do it multiple times. Try and work out when the bug is occurring. Check it occurs every time, because is it random? So once you've worked out what could be causing it by what is common. Is it always at the same time? Is it always when your player's at a certain point on the screen? As I said before, because I'm direct accessing the hardware, memory corruption is common, so a lot of the problems I come across are screen. But that said, when that other bug occurred where it was crashing at the palette switch, well, what's the palette switch code doing? Okay, well, this worked before. What's changed? Well, the CPC and the enterprise version are different. I know the enterprise version is more complex. Well, what complexity is there? Well, it uses more registers. Well, is that going to cause a problem? Oh yeah, that'll cause problems. So I took the action of backing up IX and IY. I fixed that problem, and there we go. So yeah, I was just, keep at it if you come across bugs. Hopefully you never will, but of course that's not realistic. So just look at the problems, try and think of the solutions. Most of the debugging, as you probably noticed there, I didn't really use I didn't really use the built-in debugger because it's too slow. It sounds a bit of a cliche, but the best debugger you've got with these kind of games, especially on 8-bit, is the one in your head. And if you know your own code, you should be able to come up with hypotheses of what could be causing the symptoms you're seeing, and then solve those symptoms. Now, occasionally it will come down to you're sitting there with the command step through hundreds of lines of code. It does come to that. Sometimes you have to put memory breakpoints on if you know what memory's corrupting, but that's slow. If you can guess what the problem is and then take action to solve that problem, and you're right, that will take minutes or seconds. Stepping through code can take hours, and it's utterly demoralizing. I would have had to turn off the recording because you would have just heard swearing for 2 solid hours if that had happened. But fortunately it hasn't happened today, and in all honesty, with regards to the new versions of ChibiAkumas version 1.666, there's been relatively little to that, and that's even considering the fact I'm porting to these new systems that I'm not so familiar with. So because all of the code I've written myself, I don't have many of those problems, and when I do have the problems, it's often because of the disk operation systems, things like that, the firmware-based stuff that is out of my control and I don't fully understand, and I'm relying on documentation being good. So that's another reason I would say, if you can avoid it, don't use the firmware, because if you wrote the code, if you did a half-decent job, you'll understand it and you'll be able to debug it easily. If you're using the firmware, well, that's a black box and you don't know what's inside it, and it could and probably will kick your backside, and it could be doing that, not necessarily because the firmware is just plain bad, but because you're making assumptions, incorrect assumptions based on your lack of knowledge of that firmware. Well, what registers does the firmware use? You don't know. Well, IX didn't change last time, maybe it never changes. Well, maybe it does. So when you're writing your own code, you can know your own limitations of that code and work around them. Like I know IX and IY are needed for both routines, so I knew that was the problem. Well, that could have taken me hours to fix otherwise. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more, and I'm sorry if this bored the pants off you. Take care now, and goodbye.